Hi everyone, I am making this video to show everybody how to make this style of hat on a circular knitting machine. This hat design is not my own. I just have seen this hat style around and seems to be pretty popular, and I just wanted to see if I could develop a pattern for the circular knitting machine. So this is not a hat that I would recommend for beginners to do. If you haven't done several items on a knitting machine like this, I would not recommend starting with this hat. It takes a little bit of advanced skills on the machine, and you really want to get used to the machine and how it works before you do this. I'm using a loops and threads machine from Michaels, and my machine has been used and abused. I've tried out some different yarns on it that aren't really made for it, so you'll hear it grind every once in a while, but it still works. The yarn that I've used to make this hat with is just this Karen Simply Soft yarn, again from Michaels. I think I got it on sale, so I'll be using that. It's like a light worsted weight, I guess, and it works pretty good in the machine. It says it's a medium, so that's the info on this yarn. One thing you can do, this is what I did to kind of figure out the pattern, is I did a little swatch just back and forth instead of trying to do an entire hat and getting frustrated. So I didn't do the knit one, purl one rib on the brim on this little sample, but I just knitted it and then practiced taking it off the machine, flipping it and getting my purl rows, and then taking it off and flipping it and getting my knit rows. So I'll go over all of that in just a minute. Tools that you'll need are gonna be circular knitting machine. You could knit this by hand if you want, but this tutorial is for one of these machines. Like I said, this is the loops and threads. It's a 40 needle machine, and it made a hat big enough for me, and I'm an adult woman, so I think you'll be able to get pretty good sizing on it. It does, even though it fits and it's not too tight, it does stretch quite a bit to fit, so that the stitches get stretched out quite a bit. I would like to see it made on a Addy machine with the more hooks on it and see what the difference is. And I'm thinking about upgrading to one of those machines. So if anybody makes this and makes it with one of those machines, I'd love to see it. You'll want to have some waste yarn for casting on initially. You'll want to have a crochet hook if you want to do the knit one, purl one rib for the brim here. I'll show you how to do that, but you'll need a crochet hook. The gauge doesn't really matter, but this one is a J. If I can get it to focus, but it's a J hook. And then you'll want just a blunt sewing needle. One came with your machine, I'm sure, a plastic one. And then I like to use a circular knitting needle set to take the work off of your machine and hold your work while you flip it inside out and then put it back on your machine. I don't guess you would have to have one of these. You could probably just do it with your needle and some waste yarn, but I find this is really convenient and it makes it very easy to handle. I'm pretty clumsy by nature, and this makes it pretty easy to put the stitches back on. Other than that, just some scissors to cut. You need scissors. So again, we're going to be making this hat, which has a knit one, purl one, turned under brim, so it's not a completely doubled hat like a lot of your sock hats are. And then we're gonna knit, this is 24 rows, and then turned under. And then we're gonna knit 5 rows, and then we're gonna turn the work inside out, put it back on the machine, and that'll create a purl for 6 rows. And then again, we're gonna take it off the machine, flip it, and then do another 6 rows, take it off, flip it, do another 6 rows, take it off, flip it. So back and forth. And then this last section, I did 12 rows, and then just did a regular kind of gathered closure on the top for that. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple. The most difficult part is just getting used to taking it off the machine, flipping it inside out. And then another key point, when you flip it inside out, you have to reverse the direction that you're going. You'll be able to see, and I'll show you when we get going, that you just want to follow the line that your yarn is going to take. You don't want to go back, because then you'll be basically knitting a flat hat that you'll have to sew up, and we don't want to do that. We want to take a finished hat off of the machine. At least I do. So, all right, that is the introduction, and I'm going to get to it and show you guys how to do it on the machine. So first thing I want to do is cast on, your usual cast on with just some waste yarn here. Now that we've got that, I'll just set my machine up. And for this hat, for this size, I use the loosest tension here, which is this last largest hole on this machine, to get that I got. So I'm going to do that. And since I'm trying to make this hat and film it at the same time and narrate, I'm sure I'll have some mistakes happen, and I'll show you guys how to fix those along the way whenever we get to them. So I'm just casting on a few rows here of my waste yarn. It's going to get me about where I need to be. So there, just throw that to the inside. So now I'm onto my yarn I'm actually going to make the hat with. I'm going to pull some of that out. I always get a yarn barf at the very first. That one done. Just going to cut that off so you guys don't have to wait on me to untangle it. Okay. So again, just thread the machine, continuing on. I stopped right there, right before my black beginning. And I just put the new yarn on my black, and then I'm going to thread it through the loosest tension down here on the last. And we're going to knit, and we're going to knit 24 rows. And those of you guys that have a handy dandy counter on your Addy, that's super awesome. I'm going to attempt to make sure I keep up with my rows while trying to demonstrate this, but I might have give or take a row here or there because I'm trying to pay attention to you guys. So right here at the front, because there's not any tension here, I find it likes to kind of jump up the needle, so you just want to make sure it's down all the way on there so you don't drop a stitch. And then there's where my machine likes to hang up on me a little bit because I've abused it. Once you get a few rows going, just like with any other project, you can get a little bit faster. So I'll meet you back here when I get the 24 rows done. Okay, I have knit my 24 rows now of just the regular knit pattern. And now what we want to do is go through and do a knit one, purl one all the way around, or knit two, purl two, or however you want to do it for whatever style you want. But I just did a knit one, purl one on the hat that I did. And I'll show you real quick how to do that in case you haven't done that before. So I like to kind of turn my machine around so that the stitch that I'm working on is opposite of me. I just find it's easier that way. And you'll need your crochet hook. And basically all you're going to do, take this out of here for now because we're not going to knit on this round. And if anybody has an easier way to do this, I'm all ears, but this is the way I know how to do it. You could probably take it completely off and put it on the needle and go around and do one here and there and here and there, but this is just the way that I've done it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and lift my work up like this onto the needle. I'm gonna slip it off that first needle and just go ahead and unravel it until we get down to the very first stitch on here. Okay, so there's the very first stitch. So now we're just going to insert our crochet hook and go up each stitch with your crochet hook on the top of the work. And then when you get to the top, you'll just slip that back on the hook right there. You don't have to get it down over, the little black things here. You can just stick it right in that hook edge right there. That's all it needs. It's right there. We'll be fine. When it comes back around, it'll put it on the edge where it needs to be. If you were to put it around the two little black things at the base right now, when you come back around, it'll pop your stitch off. So you don't want to do that. So we've got that one done. And you can see the knit side is now up here, which will create a purl side on the reverse. And then we can get our pattern going around. So I just take it over to the next one. This one we're leaving as it is because it's going to be a purl on the other side. It's a knit on this side. I'll just slip it up into the hook on the very top, and then we'll go on to this next one. So knit one, purl one, so we leave that one alone, and then we're going to knit this one. And just take it off, pop it open all the way down until you get to that last stitch. So there's our waist yarn. There's the first actual stitch of the hat. Put it in, crochet all the way up. and slip it back on the machine and just in the hook right there. So you can see the pattern starting. We got the knit one, purl one, knit one, and it'll be opposite on the reverse side, which is actually the outside of the hat. This is the inside of that. And we're just going to continue that all the way around. So knit one, purl one, knit one, come around. That's a purl one. So we're going to leave it and advance again. This is going to be our next knit one here. So you're just going to do that all the way around, and I'll meet you when we get back here and I'll show you how to turn the brim under. Okay, I'm back now. We've got our knit one, purl one all the way around, and before I moved on, I wanted to show you guys something that happens, and if you're not paying attention, it'll kind of bobble your stitches a little bit. So when I started my knit one, purl one, and I did the first stitch and changed it to a knit, it popped the stitch off of the little black keepers down here, and this stitch here is what I'm talking about. Let's get it. So this one here is what I'm talking about, because I started here, so this stitch should be knitted, but it's actually not, because it popped when I lifted this stitch up here. It popped this stitch, which is supposed to be on the little black keepers, off. So it's not a big deal. It's just something to take notice of if that happens, so that you can correct it before moving on. So all we're going to want to do is just knit this final stitch for the machine. So this working into the yarn should be the only thing on this hook. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then we'll go to putting it, turning the brim under. So this stitch has not been completed yet, and we're just going to lift that up over with this working yarn still in there. And now the stitch is completed and it's in line with everything, and we're ready to move on to the next one. So your machine should basically look like this at this point. So all of the stitches are in the little hook down there and ready for the next step. If we were just going to continue knitting, we would just continue knitting, and the action of the machine would take care of itself and make it all work correctly. But we want to turn this edge up and put it over the hooks, so that we'll have a doubled, a turned under brim. So how we do that is you are going to want to start with your first needle. And a big thing here is to make sure that you keep all of these stitches in the little hook, and there's going to be a double stitch in each one of these hooks before we're done. There'll be nothing on these little black knobs down here, the little black keepers. So I'll start with my first black stitch. I'm going to follow that all the way up to here, and I'm just going to grab this first bar right there. So you can see we followed the stitch from the hook here all the way, and we got to put the first blue bar, which is down here, not your waste yarn bar, on there. You got to put the bar for your hat that you're using. So that's going to be that one, and we're just going to slip it over the needle, and you can see there you've got 2 loops now in the hook of that. You just want to leave them in the hook. It's the easiest way to do it. The machine will take care of it on the coming back around. So the next one is gonna be on our purl side, and so you can follow that down. Try to follow it down with you guys here, and it's just gonna be right here, this next one there, and we're gonna put it on the machine. The crochet hook works really well for this. We'll advance the machine, keep it where you guys can see it. So now we're on another knit row, so you can see this other knit row here. And we're going to take that bar and put it on there. Now we're on what would be a purl on this side, knit on this side. Take that bar, advance it, put it on there. And you're just going to go all the way around, so you can see the next is this knit and knit. You don't want to grab these. These are the in-between stitches. It's just this right here. And you can go all the way up and find where your waste yarn starts. And then you've got your bar down there in the hole, right down there. So you're going to grab it and put it on the next hook. Again, all of these are just going in the little hook right here. There should be 2 stitches in the hook, and you're going to do that all the way around. Do another one with you guys. So we just did a knit stitch and we got the purl bar on top. Those are pretty easy. They're just hanging out right there. And we're going to slip it over the next hook. You're going to be tempted to grab this right here because it's sticking up at you. But that's not what you grab. That's just the in-between. But it's right there and it's begging you to put it on a hook, but it's not the right one. You can look with this and see that you've got a knit stitch here, and so you just follow the knit stitch up to the first bar. So there's your waste yarn bar, there's your knit stitch bar. You just grab it. Okay, so do that all the way around and I'll meet you right back here and we'll continue knitting the hat. Okay, so here we are back again. You should now have all of your stitches placed on your needles all the way around so that you now have a doubled up brim. Again, it should look pretty similar to the last step. All of the stitches need to be just on the hooks and not around the little black keepers. No sense in doing all that right now because the machine will take care of that for you. So we've got 2 stitches on each hook. The last live stitch and then the very first stitch of the hat from the brim. And that's where we're at now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to knit 5 rounds. So you can advance it to where you'll start again. In this case it's my black needle, and you can see the working into the yarn is going that way. And we'll just advance it, making sure that all of the stitches before we start stay right there. We don't want them to slide down because when it comes back around it'll pop them off if it slides down on the black things at this point. But what you do want is all of your new needles coming around, like this one, you want to pop it down below that little knob right there, because that knob is going to make sure those stitches get pushed down on the little black keepers and the new yarn goes in between them to create the knit stitch. So that's what you want to do on this step, is just make sure as it's coming around that you keep pushing your work down so that it will go onto the little keepers where it's supposed to. So we'll go ahead. I've got that stitch pushed down. The stitch before it is still above that little knob right there. It's still above. We want that last stitch of the doubled up round to stay right there in that little hook. We don't want it to get pushed down. So now we'll slowly advance and just keep making sure that you push all of those down. So you can see as it goes around now, the machine has done what it's supposed to do, and it's pushed those two loops onto the little keepers so that the working yarn can now go through those two loops. So we're just going to do that all the way around. It's on the two little black keepers, and that one is about to be on the two little black keepers. And so just go slowly on this round, making sure that it stays down and going all the way around. So this one, and I think the stitch before it too, because I wasn't paying as close attention as I should. You can see this is a problem that you can get, and trying to get where you can see it. One of the stitches is on the keeper where it's supposed to be, but the other stitch is right back behind there in the hook of where the working yarn is going to be, and that's not where you want it to be. You want it to be up on the keeper. So I'm going to back it up and put that back on the black, and like I said, I'm going to check this one. I think this did the same thing, and then we'll advance again. When you back up, you just want to look, because this one was going to flip that stitch over, and I didn't want to do that. And this stitch over here has now been put on the little black keepers because it had advanced enough. So I'm just going to pop it back there because I don't want it on the black keepers yet, because when we come back around and that needle comes up, it'll just pop the stitch off, and then you'll have a drop stitch, and then it's a mess. So again, the machine, since I'm going the opposite way, is wanting to back these two stitches over there. At this point, that one is really okay because that's where we want it to be. You don't have to pop it back over, but I'll go ahead and do it. But these two are the ones I was concerned with. I just wanted to make sure that that had the two stitches on it there. And now that one, because it backed up, has got the two stitches down there. And we're going to be ready to go all the way around again. So I don't like to go back and correct a lot of problems when the hat's done. I like to try to catch them now and fix them right now so that when my hat's done, it's done. So again, we're just going through, making sure all of those pop down. It's a little awkward for me to turn because I'm trying to do it around the camera. That's where my machine gets caught up because I've abused it. Push it along a little bit. All of those stitches are still looking good. Okay, so we're all the way back around again, and now you've got how the machine normally looks when it knits. You've got this is really the double stitches on all of the keepers, and the last row is down on the hooks where it needs to be. And we're coming back around now. So now you'll be able to speed up a little bit more, but because of the tension here with the double brim, pulling it, that way, instead of pulling down, which is what the machine needs. And I've lost my little clips over the years. I don't know where they are, but, or over the year, I think I've only had this machine a year. But I just find it, if I make sure I keep pulling down on this as it goes around, it'll be fine. So now we're just going to do, so that was one round and we're doing 5 total. So we're just going to do 4 more. And just making sure that these, whoop, there's another mistake right there. It didn't catch this yarn, and it didn't, so that's going to be a drop stitch if we don't fix it on the way back around. So I'm just going to back it up. To right there. So gonna make sure I pop that down, and that one goes on there, and then we'll just go back and continue again. This one popped, the little stitch popped off the keeper, but it's gonna be okay because the working part of the yarn is in the hook, and I know that the 2 stitches went over the back of it, so I'm not going to worry about getting that back up. As long as your working end is in your hook, you're going to be fine. So you can see it doesn't, it wants to stay above these little knobs right here, and it's got to be below them for the machine to work properly and get those stitches where they're supposed to be. So I just make sure that I'm pulling down on it. Like I said, this goes a lot faster when you have a machine that doesn't have ground down gears like mine, and you're not trying to maneuver around a camera like I am right now. Okay, and now we're back again. The more length you get on this, the less tension is going to be pulling in, and you can start pulling down. If you have your weights, you can put those on. It would probably help at this point. But we're just going to complete our 5 rounds, and I'll meet you right back here and show you how we take it off and flip it so we get the purl bumps on the outside. Okay, so I've done my 5 rows, and I'm back to the starting point, my little black needle. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the work off the machine, we're going to flip it inside out, and then put it back on the machine. And then at that point we'll have to crank the opposite direction that we were cranking in. But I'll show you what all that looks like here now. Again, for me, the easiest at this point is to actually turn my machine around, so that my work where I'm going to be taking the stitches off is across from me. It's just easier for me. So I ended the stitch on that last needle because that's the black one's where I started, and I'm just going to take the working end off of the machine and just lay it out of my way. Now is where you'll want your circular knitting needle if you have one. Like I said, I haven't even tried it with just your sewing needle and some waste yarn because I just have these, and I tried it and it worked out really well. And I mentioned in some of the posts on Facebook that I'm pretty clumsy at things, and so this I think helps me because the stitches when I go to put it back on just slide right up next in row, and I'm not having to fiddle with it and drop it and do all kinds of crazy things. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to advance it, and just like you were taking your work off the machine if you were done. We're just going to take it off, but we're going to put it on these circular knitting needles. So I'm going to advance it, and then when this first black stitch goes down, I'm just going to lift it off. And then this one. And I found instead of going all the way around and you know, because if you're taking off, you could go all the way around and then go pick up your stitches. I drop stitches that way because, again, I'm clumsy. And this way the machine doesn't let me mess that up. I can only get the next stitch off, and I don't have to worry about accidentally popping off the next 2 or 3 stitches and then having to go fix them and spend all that time doing that. So right now I have to kind of put a stitch on and pull it through to get it next in line, but once we get a little bit further down the line, the work will stretch with us and I can pick up several of them. Just like that one almost popped off because I had pulled it up too much on the next round. I pulled that one off of the little black keepers, so I gotta undo it. It wouldn't come off for me if I didn't do that. Now these are still on the keepers. Nope. Yep. And I'm just gonna take these off now. Got my working yarn in there, so I'm gonna back it up and get that out of there. Okay. So now we've got all of our work off of the machine, and it's held nicely on these circular needles for us. And all we're going to do is, because this is the way it was on the machine with your waste yarn on the inside, so the wrong side of the hat is what you can see on the inside of the machine, and the right side of the hat is what's outside here. So we're just going to flip it inside out, so that now you have the wrong side of the hat on the outside right here, and you're looking now, when you look down in the machine, you're looking at the right side of the hat that will be showing when you wear it. So just quickly, for anybody who doesn't knit outside of this machine, if you don't already know, there's really only 2 stitches in knitting. And really it's only 1 stitch. It's just one way or the other. And then everything else is a combination of the 2. So there's the knit stitch, which is this way, where you see this little, it's almost like a heart right there. That's a knit stitch. And then this on the wrong side is a purl stitch. So you'll hear a purl bump. Sometimes people refer to the purl bump. So that's just the purl bump right there. You can't really see those little hearts like you can on the other side. So you've just got this line right here, which are the purl bumps, and then your knit stitch. So for this hat, all it is that's the knit stitch, which is technically the front of the stitch, and then this is the purl stitch with your purl bumps, and that's the back side. So if you were to flip it over, the knit stitches look like that on the back side, and the purl stitches look like that on the outside. A lot of you guys may already know this, but just for anybody new to knitting and got one of these so that they could get into it, that's really the basic of all knitting. Is it's just a purl stitch or a knit stitch, and everything, even lace work, is just a combination of the 2 and combining stitches together and that type of thing. So it's really not that bad. But anyways, back to where we were at. So now we've got our work flipped. So what you were looking at before on the inside is now on the outside, and the outside of the hat, or the right side of the hat, is now on the inside of the machine. That's what you're looking at. So here we're just going to put these back on the machine, and this is why I like, these circular needles, because I can just advance all of the work really easily. It slides really easily, and then I've got this hanging on for me right here. So now all I do is I just go through and I just slip each one of these on the hook. So you can see how easily that goes with this needle in my hand like this, because as I'm going, I just push the next one up and the rest follow in line. So again, we're just putting it on the hook. You don't have to worry about putting anything over the little black knobbies at the base. Just make sure all your stitches stay in that hook right there as you go along and advance, and you'll do that all the way around here. And I believe I saw another post I mentioned earlier where somebody did, a similar type hat, and where they had the pearl bumps on the outside, and they had said that they use waste yarn and knit a couple rows and then flip it that way, and that could work really well too. I don't know, but that would be an option. But the idea is the same. You just want to hold your work so it doesn't unravel, flip the hat inside out, and get it so that you get it back on your machine, and you're now looking at your right side of the work. So the side that will be showing when you're wearing the hat, the outside of the hat, is what you're looking at down here in the bottom. So I just go all around. As you see, when I need more stitches, I just push that, and all the rest just follow in a nice little line. So I really like it, using the circular knitting needles. If you don't have them and you're not going to make a bunch of these hats, I wouldn't say you'd need to go out and buy a set, but you could do it several different ways, but I like this way. Okay, see? So now our needle's clean. We've got our work back on our machine, and we've got everything set up so all those stitches are in the little hooks on all the needles around there. You don't have anything on the little black keepers. And then, like I mentioned at the start of the video, and then again at the start of this section, one of the biggest things is you'll actually have to crank the opposite direction, because you can see the working end of the yarn is now going this way. When we started out, the working end was going that way, so when the machine went around counterclockwise, it went in line. If we kept it going counterclockwise, now we would be knitting back again, and we would have a hole right at the start of this on this row, and we don't want that. So all you have to do is get your machine in the position just like it needs to be for knitting, and then we want it to go this way on the machine. And then as you progress, you can check your progress, because you always want the right side, or the knit side, facing you. Now moving forward as we flip, because I'll get myself backwards when I'm not paying attention and accidentally put it back on the machine with the purl side showing, and then I have to take it back off again and put it back on the right way. But at this point at the alternating, your last set of rows before you start knitting again should always be a knit. And you'll see that when we flip it around again. But so if we were to crank the handle away from us or a clockwise direction, the machine would turn in a counterclockwise direction and it would go backwards, which is not what we want. So we want to crank the machine towards us, and that will turn this part of the wheel in a clockwise direction. And again, just as before, you want to make sure that all of your stitches are popping down and getting on the little black keeper down there at the bottom. Okay, so it wants to kind of jump up here, and you just want to make sure that it gets pushed down so that stitch gets on the little black keeper and the machine can have the action that it needs to have. It's not quite as finicky about it as when we went around the first row on the brim, because there's a little bit less tension pulling inward now as before. And again, you guys can go a lot faster than this, but I'm in an awkward position trying to make sure that everything stays in the video where you can see it. Okay, so that's the first round. That wasn't too bad. Everything stayed on. So now on this section, so we did 24 for the brim. We did 5, which is kind of like a transition. And then this row is going to be 6. And all of the next rows until the very end are going to be 6 back and forth. So just keep going around until you have 6 rows of this section, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll flip it again. Okay, so here we are. I've done the 6 rows now after flipping our work. So we now have these purl rows on the outside of our hat, and we're gonna take the work off and flip it back around again so that we get the knit rows. I don't know if you guys can hear some background noise in this video, but I'm doing some pressure canning. So if you're wondering what the noise is, if you can hear it, that's what it is. Okay. So we'll just do the same thing that we did before. And we're going to take this loose here. We want it on that black stitch or black hook, and we're going to grab our circular knitting needle, and we're just going to continue to advance it in the direction we were going in so that we can pop the stitches off. So you guys have already watched me do this once. I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me go all the way around again. I'm just going to get these off, and I'll be back with you here in just a second. Okay, so here we are. I took the work off of the machine again. This is what we were looking at before. The right side of the hat that you would see on your head if you were wearing it, was inside of our machine. And you can see that we have all of those purl stitches. These are the knit stitches. So now what we want to do is flip it inside out again. So now we're back to the way that we started with it on the machine. Get my waste yarn out of the way, tuck it down in there. And so here it is. Again, this is the way it was when we first started before we flipped it out to get our purl bumps. So you see our original purl. Now we have the knit stitches that make up the purl bump stitches on the outside. So again, like I said before, you know you're doing the correct thing when you're putting it back on the machine if your previous section are knit stitches facing you. If you can see the knit stitches, you're putting it back on the machine in the correct direction. But you can also, gauge by your waste yarn. Starts on the inside, goes on the outside, goes back to the inside, and continues on like that. So we're just going to do the same thing again that we just did. We're going to pull our needle through here so we have our stitches on the end, so we can place it back on the machine. And I always start with my first black hook. So making sure that our working yarn is out here and not down in the machine. And then just gonna, oh, this is another thing. You want to make sure that you put the stitches on correctly. If you just slide it on like that at this point, this stitch is crossed. Can you see that? It's crossed over right there. So you don't want to do it that way. You want to make sure that you're slipping it on there so the stitch is not crossed. You can see that it's open now, like that. So that's the way that you want all the stitches to go on there. And again, just to go over again, we're just making sure those stitches stay in the little hooks right here when you put it back on, and as we go around, making sure our stitches lay the correct way, don't get twisted, and stay in that little hook. Okay, so now here we are again, back with all of our stitches on our hooks all the way around, and our working yarn is now going back this way. When I turn the machine around, you'll see a little bit better. We've got our knit stitches facing us here, and then our purl, and then our waste yarn. So this is the inside of the hat. And I'm just going to flip the machine back where it's supposed to be. And again, we want to make sure as we go into this next round that all of these last stitches stay in the hook and don't slide down here. So I'll advance it just a little bit here, get it put in my machine. So again, like I said before, you have to be mindful of the back and forth and back and forth. On the last row, we were cranking so that the top of the machine went this way because the yarn was facing that way. Now that we've got it turned back around, the yarn is now facing that way. So we've got to crank the machine in our normal clockwise handle, which puts the machine in a counterclockwise direction. But if you get lost, you can always just look at your working yarn, and you don't want to go back where you just came from. You want to continue to go around the machine. So I'm going to slip this back where it goes, and I want this stitch to stay in the hook, and as I advance, now I want this stitch to go down on the little black keepers. So we've still got this stitch is in the hook, and that stitch here has gone down underneath the little, there's a little ledge on that black needle right there, and that's going to make sure the previous stitch stays on our little black keepers, and the working yarn can go down in between it. So that's the thing you just want to make sure of when you're starting this round, is that the last stitch there stays in the hook, and then you push this one down so the machine operates as it's supposed to. And if you take this kind of time here, it will save you time in the long run from fixing things and just being really frustrated. And I do also hand knit, and even though this hat takes longer than just your standard, crank and doubled beanie, you get it done a lot faster than if you were to hand knit it, unless you were just a crazy fast hand knitter, which if you are, I don't think you'd have one of these machines. But I do pretty good. I can't remember my stitch per minute right now, but I do fairly decent on knitting by hand, but this is still faster than knitting these hats by hand. So just making sure that the machine has the opportunity to do the job it's supposed to now, and you'll be a lot less frustrated when it's all said and done. So we're just advancing around, and at this stage, because we've got so much more of the hat, there's not so much inward force anymore. It goes a lot easier for you. Again, if you can hear that noise in the background, that's my pressure canner. Sorry if it's distracting. So we've got back around here to our first, and we're just going to continue to go around again 6 rows. Each of these stripes has 6 rows. So we'll just continue that, and I'll meet you back here when I get done with this row. Okay guys, so I've not completed my rounds, but I said I would show you mistakes as they happen and help you know how to correct them. So where I was talking about before, where I caught them, where the stitch kind of slipped in there and didn't stay on the little black keepers like it's supposed to, so that when it gets around here, it'll get flipped up and over, like this stitch is done. This stitch, I didn't catch it when it was right over here where I like to correct it. It was further over this way when I saw it. So I just let it come all the way around. But again, it's just something to be aware of, because if we don't correct it, then you're going to have 2 stitches knit together, and it's going to kind of make a bobble in your work. So I'll advance it to that stitch. It's this one right here. So you can see down in here, we've got the two stitches. 2 stitches down there. There's one down there and one right here. So one of these should be flipped over. And back it up a little bit so we can see. a little bit better. So see if I can do this and show you guys at the same time. So I don't want these two knitted together. That would be 2 rows knitted together. So I just need to figure out which one is from the last row. And if you give it a little tug, you can see that this, you know, tightens up. So this one right here is the last row. So this is supposed to be in the hook, and this one underneath it is supposed to be flipped up over. So that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to try to do it holding the machine where you can see. But we're just going to grab this stitch below. This needle's a little dull for this. I'm going to grab my sharper needle here. Some of you may wait and, you know, take the stitch down and redo it later, but I just don't really like doing that personally. When I'm done, I like to be done. So I've got, almost got that stitch. It's hard to do one-handed trying to keep it where you can see it, so forgive my clumsiness. Okay, I think I got it now. So I got that stitch, and all I'm going to do at this point is bring it up and over that, which is where it's supposed to be. That's where the machine was supposed to put it if it hadn't have been in the hook. And then that's supposed to be pushed right down there. Sorry if I got in the way of any of that, but I just, you know, popped it back up over it like it was supposed to be here. And this is the last row yarn is where it's supposed to be, because the machine would, when it would pop up, the last working yarn would come out of this hook and get pushed down on those little nubs. So now we're where we're supposed to be again. I just wanted to show you guys that in case you wanted to fix it as it happens. If you didn't catch it, you know, right in these first few stitches and it was all the way over here like I did, that's how you would fix it as you come around. You just take note of it and fix it there. This one has popped over, but it's actually the way it's supposed to be. This is the working, this is the last row that we knitted here. I think it's the way it's supposed to be. Let's double check. Yeah, that's the last row there. So, and the row before that got flipped over like it was supposed to be. So that's fine there. We don't have to worry about those. So now I'm going to continue knitting until I get my 6 rows, and then I'll meet you back here, unless another issue comes up, and I'll show you that. Okay, so now we're at the end of my 6 rows on this section now, and you can see it kind of taking shape. You know, we've got a purl row, a knit row, a purl row on the inside of the hat here, or the wrong side of the hat. When you turn it inside out, it'll be a knit. This will be a knit row, this will be a purl row, and this will be a knit row. So we're just gonna repeat the process we've just done again. I like to flip my machine around, take this working yarn out. I want it to stay on the black hook. That's the last stitch there. And we're going to, I'm sorry, I don't want it to stay on the black hook. I want it to be right before the black hook. There we go. And we're just going to advance and take it off all the way around. Sorry guys for that little bobble. I'm recording with my phone, and my boyfriend just drove by the house, and my phone will connect to his truck, and it connected to his truck and shut the video off. But this is right about where it shut off. But we've already done this. It's just taking all of the stitches off and putting them on our needle again so that we can flip our work. I just want to show you where we're at with that. Okay, so same thing we've been doing. It's just the pearl knit is starting to show up now, and that's just the basic idea for the whole hat, and you just continue going that way. This is the one that I made, is kind of a slouchy version, so it sits on your head pretty nice, and this slouches down, and I think it looks nice. You could do less rows and have a tighter version if you wanted, so you could really see those rows a lot better, but for the look that I got, I did kind of a slouchy version. So we're just going to repeat that process until you have, you know, your first transition, and then 1, 2, 3 purl rows before we do our end. So you're basically going to have 3 knit sections and 3 purl sections. This one was 5 stitches, this is 6, this is 6, this is 6, or sorry, rows, 5 rows, 6 rows, 6 rows, 6 rows, 6 rows, 6 rows. And so I'm going to continue the hat in the pattern that we've been doing, just flipping inside and outside and knitting our rows until I get to this point right here, and then all we'll have to do is finish the rows for the hat out, and I'll show you that. But if you've made it to this point, then the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory, but I'm still gonna go ahead and show it to you. Okay, see you back here in a minute. Okay, so I've completed everything up until the last purl round. So the hat is on here. This is the outside of the hat, or the right side of the hat. The part of the hat you'll see when you're wearing it. And we've got our brim. We've got our first transition knit row, just transitioning from the brim to the pattern. And then we've got our purl row, purl section, knit section, purl section, knit section, purl section, which in my hat is where we want to kind of end our section. So I had 1, 2, 3 purl sections, and 1, 2, 3 knit sections, and that gives our pattern that we've got going. So right now we are right here. We're at the end of this last purl section in our hat. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take it off, and we're going to flip it for the final time so that we can do our final section of the hat, which will be the very top of the hat. And we just do like we've been doing. I like to turn my machine, and I will continue to crank it in the direction that we were going before, and that will allow me to slip these off. Whoop. So right here, somehow in my little bit, it didn't work correctly like it's supposed to. So I've got a slipped stitch right here. So we're just going to take this, and it should go this way through the stitch to make our purl bump like that. So just go ahead and fix that now. Whoop. There we go. So you're just going to continue doing that all the way around, and I'll meet you back for the final flip. Okay, so I've just finished taking the work off, like I started a minute ago, and it's still in the position as if it was on the machine. I haven't flipped it yet. So where we last ended, the right side of the hat you would see if you were wearing it, is on the inside of the machine. You can see the right side when you're looking down the machine. So for this final section, no matter how many rows you make your hat, you want to end with the wrong side of the work on the inside of the machine, where you can see the wrong side of the work. So our waste yarn will be on the inside. So in continuing with the pattern, you know you're doing the correct thing. If your knit rows, if you can see your knit rows right here. So now we're just going to put this back on the machine, and then what we'll do is we will knit 12 rows, and that will be this final section here. I'll knit on the right side of the hat, and this is 12 rows, and then we'll be able to pull it together. So I'm just going to put the hat back on the machine and knit those rows, and I'll be back with you. Okay, so here we are. I've got my work put back on the machine for the final time, reversed. So now basically the way we started out, where the wrong side of the hat is what you can see on the inside of the machine, we've got all our sections done here, and we see the knits for the final purl section on the right side. So these knit stitches on the wrong side are a purl on the right side. That's this last section. We're right here. It's back on the machine. Now we're going to knit 12 rows, just like you would normally do. And this is the final home stretch of the hat. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll close it up. Gonna just advance it. My working yarn is going that way. We're going the way we originally started out when we first started the hat. And no matter how many sections you decide to make your hat, you know, more or less sections depending on how slouchy or not slouchy you want your hat to be, you always want this to be your final row if you want to go for this, you know, final knit look on the very top of the hat. You'll want these stitches to be knit stitches, which are purl on the opposite side, and then you'll knit continuing on. So again, we're making sure these stitches are in the hook right here, and then we're going to push this next stitch down so it goes where it's supposed to be, so that the hook can take the working yarn down and make the knit stitch. So making sure they all go down as they come through. Okay, so they all went down. Now we're back like we would normally be, and we just want to continue going around for 12 rows. Now 11, that was our first row. We had a little bobble right here because it wasn't pushing down the way it was supposed to. Again, if you are not like me and didn't lose your weights and have your weights, they would probably help you at this point. But we just slipped that back up on the little black tab there, and we'll continue going. That way we don't have to fix something later. And I knocked that down and knocked this stitch back here. Put it back on the little block. Okay, so we are now completely done with all of our knitting that we need to do on our hat, and we're just gonna take it off the machine like you normally would and do this just gathered top up here. Everybody, if you're doing this hat, should already know the basics of that, but I'm gonna go ahead and film it just so it's here. But we're done. We're ending there. I'm just pulling off some extra yarn and cutting it there. And this time we're going to go ahead and use our needle and just put it on the end of our working yarn right here. And we're just going to take the hat off the machine. Make sure that's in that last stitch right there. Again, for me, I like to turn my machine away from me so I can see better what I'm doing. I wish this needle was just a little bit thinner because I can't pop them off quite as easily as I can with my circular knitting needles. But again, you could go ahead and advance it all the way around and then pop it off the machine, but like I said before, I'm pretty clumsy about things, and I tend to drop stitches when I do that, and then I have to fix stitches, and I don't like doing that. So I like to just pop them off this way as I go around. So we've gotten them all off of there now, and you'll just do gathered top for that. So just cinch it tight. And for me, what I like to do is just kind of follow the stitches around the circle again, and then I'll tie it off. I just think it makes it a little bit tighter at the top if you do it twice, and you don't risk having a hole in the top of your hat quite so much. So that's all the way around again. I left myself a little loop so I knew where I started, and I'll just pull it tight there and then pull it tight again. So that's a good tight, thing. You really have to pull on it to get it open, so it makes it easier for you to go ahead and tie it off. And I just like to then take and go kind of around those stitches a couple of times. Before I then go to the inside of my hat and do my knot. Okay. And then just gonna bury the ends a little bit here, just in kind of a little whip stitch pattern. And I'll snip that off. And then the next thing to attend to is just getting rid of this waist yarn. But we also need to go ahead and tie off this first end where we started with our actual yarn, not our waist yarn. If you have a way that you like to tie it off when you start, then obviously you don't have to do this, but I didn't tie it off, I just kind of started it. So I don't need it in that waist yarn loop right there. So I'm just going to tie it off here. And again, I'm just going to bury my end with a little bit of a whip stitch across here. And then I'm going to just take it down into my doubled over brim. Oop, thought I was going to take it down. Flipped off my needle. Take it down into my doubled over brim to hide the last part of the tail, and then clip that off. And then just gonna get rid of my waist yarn. Where are you? There you are. now that I've got it out of all those loops, it'll just pull right off there. And if we did all of our stitches correctly, when we turned our brim under, they will stay and there won't be any holes in there. Okay. I'm going to turn it right side out, and there's your little hat. Done on the Addy, I mean not the Addy, the Loops and Threads machine. I'd like to see it done on the Addy, because like I said, I'd like to see what it looks like with the few extra needles if it doesn't stretch quite as much, you know, when you wear it. You can see how much those stitches are stretched out. For an adult, it's probably not going to bother anybody. It doesn't really bother me when I wear the hat. I just would like to see the difference. At this point, the next thing you can do to really take it from homemade to handmade is to block it, and you'll just either steam it or soak it in some warm water and then stretch it over your form, or lay it and stretch it out flat, and that just gets all these stitches right where they need to be and evens them all out and really, you know, makes it look nice. And if you want to attach a pom, you can attach a pom there. So that's it. That's how I do the hat on the Loops and Threads machine. And I hope the tutorial was informative for you guys and helpful and not too confusing. But turn the hat out pretty quickly. I've been doing several other things while I've been doing this tutorial, and you know, still made the hat too on top of it all. So there it is. I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments and if you'd like to see any other videos.